Next, Tricia Rogers from the London and South East region.
I'm going to speak to you about economic justice and some of the development issues. And it's kind of in the framework of the summit that the Prime Minister has encouraged this September to look at achievement of the Millennium Development Goals. And it was interesting in 2001 that the then Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, said that there was no hope of the MDGs being achieved without substantial debt cancellation. The Prime Minister was well known for being a leader on debt relief until the 2005 Gleneagle Summit, but there's been a deafening silence since then. He used to say that all the countries that qualified for concessional lending from the World Bank, the so-called IDA-only countries, needed 100% debt cancellation. There's 65 of those, but only 23 have completed the debt process. UNA is an active supporter of Jubilee Debt Campaign, who's pushing hard for some more movement on the debt issue. At the conference, we've unanimously passed a resolution encouraging the government to push for taking forward the commitment of the G8 in Germany last year to a charter of responsible lending. And I would like to hear your views on how the British can get into the driving seat and make sure that further progress does happen. Because although 88 billion has been cancelled, there's still at least another 400 billion that needs to be cancelled, and debt relief has been found to be a very effective, substantial and just form of economic support.
Next question is Gillian Briggs from the Central region.
Yes, thank you, Lord Brown. I thank you very much for what you had to say about the Security Council. However, my question really refers to the Iraq War. Is it to be an independent inquiry, please?
And the next question is Kate Grady, who's speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors and is also Vice Chair of the conference.
Thank you, Lord Malloch-Brown. I wanted to ask you, do you think the UN has done enough to combat the problem of sexual exploitation and abuse by UN peacekeepers? And if not, what more is there that still needs to be done? Thanks.
Okay, well then, let me take those three, and all very important questions. First, on the MDGs, I think, Patricia, you're right that, in a sense, the focus has drifted away from debt cancellation. I don't think there's any effort or intention by Gordon Brown and others who are so strong in it to let that happen. It's more that as campaigners, you move from target to target and hope you've locked in success on the targets you've already got commitments to. And often one finds that, in fact, instead there is backtracking and foot dragging, and you suddenly look over your shoulder and something that you thought was moving well has slowed right down. Obviously, the 23 countries that have had the debt cancellation at this stage, did so because they'd met the different performance targets, which I recognize are quite controversial, but nevertheless, they were the ones which went into this, which were these first HIPC countries. And there is meant to be a process of making sure that the bank and the IMF keep on adding in candidate countries, which then subsequently meet those criteria. And it's a good prompt from you, and I will talk to my colleagues in DFID to make sure that we feel we're keeping the bank's toes to the fire on that one. But obviously, monies for debt reduction have a cost, because the original idea, which was that the institutions themselves might just cancel it and bear the cost, they persuaded everybody that that was not financially prudent, and that therefore these debts had to be paid down, even if it was at a reduced amount, to represent a net present value. And so it has been costing a lot of resources out of current aid. And while it remains an enormously important thing to do, we were actually, frankly, also getting quite worried that it was inflating various countries' aid numbers and disguising the fact that they were not putting enough resources into new money to developing countries to support health and education. And in fact, the Prime Minister has been concentrating, as you're probably aware, on health and education initiatives. He's done a lot in both areas to pull together international donors and agencies to try and drive these forward. And he plans to use both the private sector MDG Day that he's having here in London on the 6th of May, when he's asked corporations to come and demonstrate how they are contributing to MDG achievement through their own business model, using local supply chains, etc., supporting local health services and other issues of that kind. But secondly, and perhaps more critically to this point, on September the 25th, when he has prompted this summit, one-day summit, hosted by the UN Secretary General, to try and put renewed effort behind achieving the MDGs, and that is intended to get both higher volumes of aid, no doubt deeper debt relief again, but all kinds of new public-private partnerships around specific bits of the MDGs, like trying to control and largely eliminate malaria, getting much better funding locked in for HIV and TB, securing the partnerships to get universal primary education, drawing attention to one of the most worst lagging goals, which is maternal and infant mortality. So there's a whole push on this. So while I take the point that we may have appeared to kind of take our eye slightly off debt, I think we absolutely have got our eye very, very strongly on the bigger issue of getting the world back on track for the 2015 target. On Gillian Briggs's question on the Iraq War, where we stand on that is that the government has now agreed there should be an inquiry. It is, however, stuck to what has been tradition in Britain since the Dardanelles inquiry in the First World War, to not carry out these inquiries while the war itself is continuing, because, the Dardanelles example, and I'm not suggesting there's any analogy with Iraq, but the Dardanelles example, they reported in the middle of the war, and it was obviously an absolutely dismal campaign with Gallipoli at its center. And it actually led to, I think if my history is correct, I think it actually led to Lloyd George coming to power because the Liberal government fell as a result of that inquiry midway through the war. Now, it was a happy consequence that that Asquith was replaced by Lloyd George, a much more effective war leader. But I make the point only to say that the conclusion of British politicians and I think Whitehall, but David could comment on this if I'm misrepresenting it, was after that these inquiries are very destabilizing if they occur while the fighting is still on, and possibly actually pretty hurtful to the soldiers involved, because they seem to be questioning the whole exercise while they're still expected to be putting their lives on the line. So I don't think, frankly, that Britain's active engagement in Iraq is going to be for that much longer. After all, we had hoped to be down to 2,500 in the spring. It may take longer. So I don't think nobody's suggesting this inquiry is going to be kicked off into the far, far distance. But the point is, it will wait until the war is over in the British view, or at least the British part of the war is over. On the and by the way, I in the meantime have a very good suggestion, not that it's very popular around here, which is that Jeremy Greenstock be allowed to publish his book on the war, which I expect will be much more interesting and contain many more insights than an official inquiry might, but which has been, unfortunately, it's not been possible for him to agree with the Foreign Office on redactions from that book.